Ahora sí.
Ready, set, boom.
Santa.
Come on. How come your hands are so little? You got
I
small
don't know.
hands.
I'm too. I'm far away.
Oh, in Chile, your hands are
You
tiny.
know, I would love if eventually I go again to Austin and we try
Yeah,
to do the same thing like this, but
right.
in the same room. So I
Wait. I
actually my
can. Let
hand
me
will
go.
cross the screen.
Boom. Listen, there has to be something better to talk about today than us trying to do fist bumps around the world. There just has
Yeah.
to be something better.
How are you, my friend?
I'm okay. It's hot. We're doing good. Austin is Austin. You know, it's no surprise to
Austin is
Texans that.
beautiful. Here is
Yeah,
very. We are in winter time, and it's very rainy and windy.
yeah. Well,
And
you're probably being punished for some sin you committed, which is what we talked about on Sunday.
maybe I'm paying with two winters. You will have
That's
two
right.
winters this
That's right.
year.
That's right. Well, the good news is at some point in your life, the universe will get even with you, and you'll have two summers somewhere.
Eventually, yeah, eventually.
So
Hey,
here we are.
I,
Here we
I
are.
was I, I was listening the sermon last Sunday.
Yeah. And E.
I have several thoughts about that, but the first word that came to my mind because
Heresy. Here comes
I I
heresy.
reheard the sermon this morning actually,
Yeah.
and uh, it's liberating.
Oh, wait. Hang on. I thought you were going to ring my bell and tell me I was
Yeah,
wrong.
is
Liberating. How so?
beauti-
How?
it's
Tell me how.
beautiful, beautiful.
How so?
It's great. It's great when someone says a public statement about sin,
Yeah.
removing sin from the center.
Yeah. Sin is not at
Because
the center. Yeah.
but we came from that culture, the culture
Yeah, we
that
did.
says, okay, let's evaluate the sins of other people in order to judge them, in order to condemn them,
That's right.
and we usually don't see our own flaws, but we have enough stuff to say about other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's
we
very
we
true.
we 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 divide this world in the people that is wrong and us.
That's
We
right.
are right, they are the sinners, and we put the sin in the middle and the guilty in the middle, and shame and all of that crazy stuff that doesn't belong to the gospel. So when someone from the pulpit says that clear, like you said last Sunday, it is good news for me.
Well,
Is for
I
me is that's the gospel.
yeah, and I thank you. I had that same sensation on Sunday that, and I think I probably talked about this in the beginning of the sermon. I think I've been waiting my whole life to say some of these things. It's a strange feeling when week after week you get to say the words you've always wanted to hear in church. It's an odd feeling. It feels heavy. It feels like a great weight of responsibility. There's also a measure of sadness to it as a how to say this, as a person of words, as a person of letters. It's like when you write a song and put it out there, and now it's out there. This is no longer These
Yeah,
are no longer thoughts. This is something that lives online now. But there were a couple of things that lingered in my heart that are, I guess, are lingering in my heart today. And you said it's liberating to hear because sin was never at the center, and most of the Christian, or I would say the religious communities from which we descend, kind of hold sin at the center. And it's easy for us to sort of navigate the world based on who's right and who's wrong. But there's another layer to that, Caesar, that I think is even deeper for me, and that is I don't only regret the way I looked out at the world that was in sin, I actually do carry a lot of scar tissue inside because of the way I looked at myself, right? So not only does the gospel make us nicer humans if we can stick to it, it makes us more healthy and more whole humans. And if I could go back and roll the clock back and develop an idea even further, if we had more time, or if I was going to add to what we talked about on Sunday, I would go in the direction of, you know, not only was that version of the gospel damaging to the people that we went to supposedly preaching the good news, but it did horrible damage to us, right? living on the knife's edge of guilt and shame all the time, convinced that God was just ready to spew us out of his mouth. And, you remember all of the imagery and all of the things we were taught. Even that.
And also, I
even that-
remember the feeling of that.
I think
it
that's
feels
what I'm
terrible.
getting at. It feels like a pit in your gut. It feels like, one of the single worst pieces of theology ever conceived in the New World, and there were many conceived in the New World, horrible pieces of theology. But one of the worst to me is that picture, that word picture of sinners dangling by a spider's web over the pit of hell. We know that as sinners in the hands of an angry God. That was a sermon Jonathan Edwards preached too. The longer I live, the more I come to realize must have been a highly traumatized human being to inflict that kind of trauma on the world around him. And that, for some of you, that might be controversial. I'm the furthest thing from a 5-point Calvinist. Whatever. But my point being, the legacy of a sin-centered gospel not only destroyed our communities and made us think we were better than everyone in the world, it took the good news out of the gospel, so what we were preaching was essentially our particular experience. But not only did it do that work, but it did great damage inside us. What's the damage on an organism for walking around all the time feeling guilt and shame and like God is disgusted with us and what is the damage on the inside of the human being from that? Well, I think that's what we're surviving, some of us. That's what we're surviving. So there was a lot of ideas on Sunday, and this coming week, Catherine teaches, and the week after that, Trey teaches. I'm having my little mini summer, sort of little cool down period. I got good friends coming in from Mexico next week, and so we're gonna travel around a little bit and sort of take some time out of the pulpit as we do in the heat of summer. But I don't know that we're done with the conversation of sin. You see, sin is not at the heart of the gospel. Sin is not at the heart of the gospel.
It is not.
Good news is at the heart of the gospel. And that good news, and this was the point I made, somewhat perhaps risky, but it was the point that I tried to make on Sunday. Even Peter, by his third sermon, has already lost the algorithm of the good news of Jesus. Even Peter, standing before the people who arrested him for doing the good work of healing a person with a physical impairment, even Peter reduces the gospel to blame and shame, and it's the one you killed, it's the one we waited for, you blew it. Even Pontius Pilate knew this was right. What an insult culturally to the Jews of the day to stand in front of them and say, even Pontius Pilate got this, and y'all blew it. So what I'm doing is I'm showing you, or showing us, how close to the message of Jesus that evolution took place. We're talking the friends of Jesus, the chosen leader of the 12.
Right.
You might look at the structure of the new church and you might say, well, his brother James was the leader of the church at Jerusalem, but Peter was the leader of the 12. Paul became the great theologian. All of them immediately seem to want to reduce the gospel to there's an angry God, the world's on fire, you got to get saved from the wrath of God that's coming.
But
we've missed it.
When I heard that from you, which I think it was a very bold movement that you did, you're questioning Peter.
I know.
But also, something came to my mind. I don't know how to say this in English, so I will invent a word so you can correct me.
Okay.
The Johannine community.
The Johannine, yeah. And
Johannine,
for those non-theologians, that's just.
I'm sorry.
There are adjectives around the gospel. So there's Petrine and Johannine and Markin and Matthean.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well,
Johannine.
In the first epistle of First John,
Right.
when you read that very carefully, it's very interesting because we take a lot of verses from that little book, like God is love, things like that.
Right.
Or you should love your brother. If you say you love God and you don't love your brother, you're a sinner, you're a liar, things like that. But when you take a very careful approach to that book, you will see a very sectarian community.
That's right.
That only can express love to their own community. It's about them, not the other people. They go so further with that thought that when someone leaves the community, they are willing to say, "Oh, okay, they didn't belong to us in the first place. That's why they are moving away. If they were from us, they will stay." But this is a proof that they should go. Things like that that you heard so many times in
Yeah.
our churches, trying to justify that, okay, we are the chosen ones.
That's
So
right. That's
it's
right.
not just Peter that almost blew away all the power of the gospel. Was other communities also in the first century, but also it was because they were facing different
Persecution.
persecution,
different
hazards,
ideas.
stuff like that. So yeah, this is for all the people that is here. We are not
Right.
questioning all of this just without understanding that all of
Right,
that
right.
those words comes from a very specific context.
That's right.
But we are living in a different context, so we are allowed to rethink all of this.
That's the thing. And if we're going to do progressive theology, then we're going to have to give ourselves permission to even see the evolution of the apostolic teaching. When Paul loses his mind and goes off and tells people, cover your head, sit down, shut up, I wish they would castrate themselves. You guys, we have to be able to find within all of that biblical content. We have to be able to trace back at any point, what is the message of Jesus? Jesus was known to have said, love your enemies. A lot of the epistles of the new church, as you say, are sectarian by nature. They're to correct and say, these people are out. Don't even, Paul says, Jesus says, break bread. This is for all. This is my body. Paul says, throw them out of fellowship if they don't repent from sin. Even Paul, perhaps Paul even more so than Peter, certainly more so than John. Paul obsesses on the penal aspects, the legal aspects of an angry God and how to appease him, how to be justified, and all these things. And guys, let's just give ourselves permission to go back and say, our task is to embody the gospel in the world, not take everything that's written and conveyed to us as if it was the one and the same with the gospel.
Right.
We've been saying this for years, but I'm just giving us now permission to say, even Peter in early Acts loses his way and now begins to project out to the crowd. This is the one you guys killed, right? So what we're doing here, and what you're probably doing, you know, in a different way, but also in Amor Original, what is the posture with which we engage the world around us? That's the question. So here's the thing we've been asking ourselves during this series: where to next? The church itself, as we knew it, has now expired. It's not the center of people's spirituality anymore, like we were taught it must be. All the science is there. We have known it. Mostly we just go la 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 la, we ignore it. But the reality is we don't live in a world anymore where a little church on First and Main with a tall steeple represents the pinnacle of authority in people's lives. It just doesn't. So if that's the case, and spirituality is shifting, if that is the case, then we've got to be nimble as we shift, and we've got to be able to find the gospel and leave some of those other things behind. At the beginning of the series, I read 1,000 pages of Diana Butler Bass, and she makes this case from social science. There are ways of recovering ideas about a kingdom or a circle of empowerment. There are ways of recovering the embodiment of God in Christ. There are ways of recovering the idea of God that transcends all of it without dragging with it the assumption that culture has to go backwards in order to be good again. Guys, there's no reverse in the unfolding of God in the cosmos. There's no need for it. That's why there's no reverse. We don't have to go back to a time when we understood less. We understand more now. And honestly, we will understand far more not long from now. So we have to hold it very, very loosely. We have to be humble. And it's about our posture. How are we going to engage the world now? If our message is, you can be forgiven from sin by this man who lived in ancient time, we're adjacent to the gospel, but we're not all the way there. The good news is everyone is loved by God completely and always has been, right? So it's not a turn or burn. It's a let yourself be caught by the love that's been chasing you for your whole life. It's not any more difficult than that. So that's what we're taking with us into the summer. Now, listen, that's not a lot of detail. I just came out of a staff meeting where we had a far deeper conversation about some of the practical details about how to do this. I'm casting a messaging sort of arc of a philosophical sort of backdrop from sort of a 50,000-foot view. This can look like anything it needs to look like, whether you live in Chile or Mexico City or Montreal, it doesn't matter. The question is, what is the posture of Jesus in the world? Well, friends, if Jesus was found in the company of the people that our religious systems teach us are anathema and are dirty and are guilty and are shameful, if this is where Jesus is found, then that's the posture, right? Which means we've got to move the gospel past the conversation of sin and transgression and heaven and hell. It's bigger than that, and we have to recover it. So that's our work.
Totally.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a little afraid when you start to name this stuff,
Yeah.
because exactly for the same example that you mentioned during your sermon, when you said the first sermon that Jesus spoke in
Isaiah 61, he gets up.
yeah. And also because Jesus was editing Isaiah when he
Yeah.
said those words. He do you know, there's every joke has a punchline. If you miss the punchline, there's no joke. And at the moment Jesus started to say that passage from Isaiah,
Yeah.
he totally, ignore the punchline, and the punchline was the day of the wrath of the Lord.
Yeah. So even
And-
Jesus is doing some theology as he lifts from ancient
Right.
oracles what needs to go forward.
And this is my fear, is because at the beginning people said, "Oh wow, this is great, this is beautiful," and it's like Jesus says, "Okay, you maybe you don't get it," and he started to point out some examples that
Yeah.
show them that this is for all. This is not just for the Jews. This is for all. The day of the wrath of the Lord is not for other people. Could be for me. Could be for, but that's not the point. Good news are for everybody. And then people start to get angry and they try to kill Jesus at the very
right.
beginning of the ministry.
Right, because
So-
he wasn't propping up the values of their tribe. See, as long as he
Right.
worked within the tribe, they're like, we're all about this. But when they realize there's no more tent stakes that limit this from us or anyone else. See, the Jews weren't wrong to say we are God's chosen. I think, and this is true for all people, where it gets sideways is when they say we're God's only chosen. See?
Yeah, right.
So even Jesus does some theological work with ancient things. Friends, if we took every word Jesus ever said and we removed it, we don't know what he said because we only know what his friends say he said.
Right.
But if we removed it completely, we should be able to follow him around as he walked through the world, reading who he's with, where he is, how he treats the cosmos and nature
Right.
and the plants. We should be able to reassemble an entire gospel just from the movements of Jesus. Here's my point. He went everywhere that we have been taught you're not supposed to go. That may be the simplest sundial version of the gospel right there. It goes
Right.
exactly where so what then is discipleship? Discipleship is the long process of letting go everything we were taught about where love can go and following love everywhere. That's it. That's the whole deal. We should write a book. See,
I love
we should
it.
write a book. Yeah.
Maybe something in English and Spanish.
Yeah, or let's do French. Let's do French. Why not?
This is in the middle. Something in
Yeah,
the middle.
right. I only say French because I'm in the middle. I'm 1,000 miles into the Tour de France now, and I'm so excited about it, and it's gobbling up all of my July. And so, anyway, my French is
That's great.
only good in July, right? We only know
Okay.
words like that Puy de Dôme in July. Anyway, all right, bro.
Jason,
Well, good times.
I love the sermon, and I hope I hope people would appreciate all of this, because this is liberating, and this is we can be so attached to our old ideas, as you said, the church that we used to know.
Yeah.
Doesn't have any chance in places, especially in places like Austin.
Yeah, it's
You
too
know,
late. We
yeah,
can't take judgment
yeah.
to the streets. It's not going to
No.
work. It's not going to work. That has expired several generations ago.
That's right.
And I think, the conversations that we've been having with some of the younger people at ANC is that our bodies always knew that was not the gospel.
Right.
We knew it wasn't. So
Yeah.
So here we are. So I don't know where we're going to go next. I love that question. Actually, I hate that question. Caesar's like, well, what are we doing for the rest of the summer? I'm like, I have no
Right.
idea. We're going to follow our muse. We will be the vessel of the muse. We will go where the ghost of God goes, or the Spirit of God, or the Holy Spirit. And we're going to try to follow the
something.
posture of Jesus. Yeah, that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing.
That's
All right,
great.
bro. Peace out. Sunday
Peace
leftovers. See if we can do it.
Oh my